Halek Soren was a decorated police commander. Kael Triven was a celebrated hero. Rell Vaun was a ghost from the system's past. Ohlren Dace burned everything he touched, and Joren Myrick tried to stop them all, until the truth shattered him. These weren't just names, they were the centerpieces of Northway City's most terrifying descent into chaos. What began as isolated crimes slowly unraveled into a chilling pattern, revealing a network of darkness that lived inside the very walls meant to protect. In this episode of the most heartbreaking moments of the police facing the most dangerous criminals, the Macher 13, we uncover the truth behind 5 devastating encounters that push the justice system beyond its breaking point. Some stories end in arrests, others in ash, and one in betrayal so deep the scars will never heal. In the remote and seemingly peaceful town of Briar Hollow, life moved at a slow, familiar pace. People knew their neighbors, locked their doors only at night, and trusted the safety of their quiet surroundings. That illusion was shattered when a local teenager named Marin Jove vanished after leaving a community bonfire. Her phone went dead near the edge of town, and despite search parties and posters, no trace of her was found. The town, once so calm, was overtaken by fear. A second disappearance followed just 2 weeks later. An elderly man named Glenn Towser never returned from a morning walk. Then came a third. A traveling nurse passing through town failed to check into her hotel after a home visit. By the third case, panic had taken hold. Parents pulled their children from schools, people installed security systems, and the streets emptied before sunset. The local police force, small and inexperienced with major crime, found themselves overwhelmed. That's when Chief Darren Vance, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for solving complex disappearances, was brought in from the capital. With his sharp instincts and calm demeanor, he quickly took control of the chaotic situation. His first move was to map out the locations of all the victims' last known positions. It became apparent that all of them had passed through a remote stretch of forest known as the Briar Edge Trail. At the edge of that trail sat a property that had long been forgotten, an old farmhouse surrounded by rusted fencing and an overgrown yard. The property belonged to Elgar Knox, a retired butcher who had moved to Briar Hollow nearly 15 years ago. Known by few and spoken of even less, Elgar rarely left his home and was considered eccentric at best, frightening at worst. When questioned about the disappearances, Elgar appeared cooperative but emotionless. He claimed to have seen nothing unusual and denied any visitors. Despite the lack of immediate evidence, Chief Vance was uneasy. A drone scan of the property revealed a sealed underground hatch in the barn, hidden beneath old crates and debris. With a warrant in hand, police returned to search the farmhouse. What they found beneath the hatch would haunt them forever. The cellar was unlike anything they had ever seen. The walls were lined with hooks, chains, and homemade surgical tools. Large freezers hummed quietly in the corners. Blood had seeped into the floorboards, and the scent of rot filled the air. When they opened the freezers, they discovered the partial remains of at least 8 individuals. Forensic analysis later confirmed that some had been missing for over a decade. Elgar Knox had been abducting, murdering, and butchering victims for years without raising suspicion. Even more chilling were the notebooks found in a locked drawer, pages filled with anatomical sketches, times, methods, and chilling notes about the victim's final moments. The entries were detailed and cold, written as though Elgar was documenting a routine task rather than committing horrific crimes. One notebook included a name not yet reported missing: Clara Vance, the estranged daughter of Chief Darren Vance. She had gone missing 5 years earlier in a nearby county, presumed to have run away. Her remains were among those identified in Elgar's cellar. The discovery broke Chief Vance. The man who had dedicated his life to finding missing people realized he had been chasing a ghost, only to find that his own daughter had fallen victim to the very killer he was hunting. The case was solved, the killer arrested, but no one in Briar Hollow felt justice had been served. The townspeople were left with scars that never fully healed, and the farmhouse was burned down by unknown hands before the trial could begin. Elgar. Knox showed no emotion in court. He refused to speak or defend himself, sitting silently as the families of his victims wept. He was sentenced to life without parole. Chief Vance never returned to active duty. He resigned a week after the sentencing and left Briar Hollow for good. For the town, the memory of what had happened didn't fade. It lingered in the empty streets, the overgrown trails, and the silence that followed every nightfall. After the shocking discovery at the farmhouse of Elgar Knox, investigators found something far more disturbing than anyone had anticipated. Hidden within the cellar, behind a false wall, was a sealed metal cabinet containing a collection of hard drives. At first, police believed they held footage of the murders. But upon analysis, what they found was a series of recorded transactions, encrypted messages and shipping logs, all pointing to a criminal network operating well beyond Briar Hollow. The network was identified only by a symbol, a black vein twisting around a red circle. Experts from cybercrime units began piecing the evidence together and soon realized this wasn't the work of one madman. Elgar Knox had been part of something much larger, something far more dangerous. They had stumbled upon the Iron Vein. The Iron Vein was a network involved in trafficking humans, primarily for exploitation, torture, and secret auctions held in the darkest corners of the internet. Its structure was decentralized, its members anonymous and strategically placed across industries, from law enforcement to shipping. With the case now expanding across multiple jurisdictions and countries, federal authorities took over. To lead the psychological profiling of those behind the Iron Vein, they brought in Agent Kael, a former field agent turned behavioral specialist known for her exceptional instincts and near-perfect profile records. But Mara wasn't like other agents. She worked alone, stayed silent in public briefings, and always wore gloves, even in casual settings. She had seen too much. Years earlier, she had survived a hostage crisis that left several officers dead, and Mara herself mentally scarred. Since then, she worked only behind the scenes, avoiding field operations. That changed with this case. Mara identified a repeating pattern in the Iron Vein's communications. Locations mentioned in code, specific phrases referencing clean, cargo, and dates linked to obscure calendar systems. Her breakthrough came when she noticed references to a Tower 7, which had been mentioned in multiple message chains. Through surveillance and encrypted tracebacks, they identified Tower 7 as a luxury building in Northway City, a high-rise with private suites and tenants listed under fake identities. A raid was organized. Despite her aversion to fieldwork, Mara insisted on going. She had seen what the Iron Vein had done in past cases. Children vanished, families destroyed, evidence buried. She couldn't sit behind a desk anymore. The operation launched at dawn. Inside the tower, agents moved floor to floor, bypassing luxury decor and glass corridors until they reached the sealed rooms in the basement. What they found inside broke even the most hardened agents. Dozens of victims were found restrained, some sedated beyond recognition. The rooms were soundproof, windowless, and lit by artificial daylight panels. Among them were teenagers missing for years, children thought dead, and women whose identities had been erased. Every person was tagged, documented, and priced in a digital logbook recovered from a guarded terminal. In the final chamber, behind a biometric security door, Mara found a girl she recognized immediately, Danica Jarrell. Mara had been assigned to Danika's case 7 years ago during her early fieldwork. The girl had vanished walking home from school, and Mara had promised the family she'd bring her back. She never did. Danica was alive, but barely. Malnourished, eyes hollow, skin pale under artificial light, she didn't recognize anyone. As medical teams began pulling victims out, Mara stayed behind in the room, her gloved hands shaking for the first time in years. Her promise had been broken. She hadn't saved Danica when it mattered. She had found her too late. The tower raid was a success on paper. 42 victims were rescued. 6 suspects were arrested. But to Mara, it felt like a failure. She declined all interviews, refused awards, and disappeared from public service. Colleagues said she never truly returned to herself. The case had reopened a wound she had kept buried. She had always carried guilt from her past. But this was different. This was a wound that would never close. Danica survived, but her recovery would be long and uncertain. The Iron Vein network wasn't destroyed. Only one of its many branches had been exposed. Others remained hidden, waiting. Mara Kael had cracked the case, but the victory came at the cost of her peace, her belief in justice, and her place in the world she once served. The calm that followed the Iron Vein raid in Northway City was short-lived. Only a few weeks later, a different kind of terror began gripping the city. It started with a fire in a government records office, initially ruled as accidental. But then came another blaze, this time at a private law firm, then a hospital wing. Each fire was more intense than the last, and all shared the same signature. The flames spread unnaturally fast. The exits were blocked, and security systems were disabled minutes before the outbreak. The death toll was rising, and panic began to spread. Investigators initially suspected a disgruntled insider, but that theory quickly crumbled. Surveillance footage from the third fire showed a figure walking away from the scene moments before it erupted into an inferno. The figure moved calmly, confidently, as if chaos was something familiar. When enhanced, the image revealed a glint of a gas mask and long coat, an outfit designed not for disguise, but for survival. The case was officially classified as a serial arson investigation. Homeland Security was called in. The task force quickly identified their suspect, Ohlren Dace, a former chemical engineer turned pyrotechnics specialist who had once worked with a classified defense contractor before being terminated under mysterious circumstances. Ohlren had no family, no known associates, and no fixed address. His military record was heavily redacted, but what wasn't hidden was his obsession with fire. Colleagues recalled his rants about purification and the false shelter of civilization. Following his termination, he had disappeared from public life. The belief was that he had gone underground, literally. It was later discovered that he had been living beneath a condemned subway station where he had constructed an elaborate lab filled with homemade accelerants, pressure-triggered devices, and complex blueprints. What made Ohlren more terrifying than any arsonist before him was his precision. He didn't just set fires, he designed them. He calculated airflow, pressure points, and human movement, ensuring that each blaze became a death trap. No one survived if he didn't want them to. But one fire changed everything. His next target was the Northway courthouse during a high-profile sentencing related to the Iron Vein case. The building was full. Judges, attorneys, families, victims, officers. Without warning, fire alarms began to ring, and within seconds, fire burst through the lower floors. Smoke billowed upward, locking in those above. Panic spread fast. Amid the confusion, one officer, Kael Triven, a rookie on her first week of duty, defied the evacuation orders. While others ran for safety, she sprinted back inside. No one expected her to return, but she did, again and again. She carried out victims, coughing, stumbling, her uniform soaked in soot and sweat. She saved 11 people that day, including a judge and 2 children. By the time firefighters took control of the blaze, Kael was unconscious on the courthouse steps, her lungs seared by the toxic air. Her heroism made national headlines, but the cost was enormous. Kael suffered permanent damage to her respiratory system and could no longer serve on active duty. She was awarded the Medal of Bravery, but had to learn to live with oxygen therapy and constant pain. She became a symbol of courage, but inside, she struggled with guilt over the ones she couldn't reach. The breakthrough in the case came through a rare mistake by Ohlren. A scrap of melted rubber found at the courthouse matched a unique boot, sold only to registered chemists. The purchase record led police to a post office box rented under a fake name, where they finally tracked him through thermal satellite scans to his underground lair. Ohlren was arrested without a fight, standing in the center of his lab, surrounded by fire canisters labeled with future targets. He smiled as he was led away, saying nothing. He never explained his motives, never defended his actions. During his trial, he remained silent. Psychiatrists labeled him delusional but highly intelligent. He was sentenced to life in solitary confinement. Though justice was served, the emotional toll of Ohlren Dace's attacks never faded. Buildings were rebuilt, wounds healed, but the fear remained. For Officer Kael Triven, the fire never stopped. Each breath reminded her of the day she became a hero, and of the flames that nearly took everything. The scars left by Ohlren Dace's fires were still fresh when a new threat emerged. This time, not from the shadows of an arsonist, but from within the very systems designed to protect the public. The city of Northway, already battered by crime and loss, was unprepared for the chaos that came next. It began subtly. Case files vanished from police databases, court documents were tampered with, and surveillance feeds began glitching during active investigations. At first, it was dismissed as system errors or internal sabotage. But when two protected witnesses were found murdered within days of each other, alarm bells rang across every law enforcement agency. Behind these coordinated attacks was someone the media would later call the architect, a faceless, brilliant manipulator who never appeared on any camera, left no fingerprints, and whose digital presence was always one step ahead of the experts. The architect wasn't just a hacker. They were a strategist, targeting the weak spots in Northway's justice system and dismantling trust from the inside. Investigators suspected a high-level insider but had no leads. Every digital trace they followed led to dead ends, false flags, or traps that erased their systems. A federal task force was formed, led by forensic cyber investigator Joren Myrick, a man known for exposing Black Ops data leaks and infiltrating underground criminal forums. Myrick was methodical, unemotional, and extremely private. He never stayed in one city too long and had no online footprint. To catch someone like the architect, he needed to think like them. Myrick began cross-referencing, erased data, searching for patterns in what wasn't there, rather than what was. It was during one of these deep scans that he found something buried in the metadata of an archived email server, fragments of deleted files left behind by mistake. Within the fragments was a repeating code string, NH774A7. At first, it appeared meaningless. But after days of work, Myrick connected it to a sealed juvenile case from over a decade ago involving a boy named Rell Vaun. At the age of 12, Rell had been accused of orchestrating a cyber attack that shut down a state prison's power grid, allowing 3 inmates to escape. The files were sealed, the boy declared mentally unfit, and he vanished from public record. But Myrick believed Rell hadn't disappeared. He had evolved. Further investigation uncovered a trail of orphanage transfers, fake deaths, and changed identities, all aligning with cyber footprints attributed to the architect. Myrick narrowed his search to a single location: the abandoned east wing of the Northway Data Exchange, a relic from the early internet boom. No one had accessed it in years, but a thermal scan revealed heat signatures and active network signals. A team was dispatched. Inside, they found a labyrinth of monitors, wires, and servers running custom-built software. And at the center sat Rell Vaun, no longer a boy, but a pale, wiry man in his early 20s, surrounded by screens pulsing with live data from traffic cams, police radios, and financial systems. He didn't try to escape. He didn't show fear. He simply watched them approach and whispered a single word: predictable. Rell was taken into custody, and the public was told justice had prevailed. But Myrick knew better. As they began dismantling Rell's network, they found something chilling: a set of automated systems designed to trigger specific events if Rell was ever caught. These fail-safes included public data dumps, security breaches, and detailed exposure of undercover agents. One such file revealed a covert identity used by a deep-cover operative embedded in an international cartel. Days later, the agent was found dead. To contain the damage, the government issued quiet settlements and blacked out the case in public records. Rell was declared mentally unstable and placed in a high-security psychiatric facility with no access to technology. But behind locked doors, he remained calm, always watching, always calculating. Joren Myrick resigned shortly after the case closed. He cited exhaustion, but insiders believed he left out of fear that the architect had planned everything, including his own capture. No one could be certain what was still running in the background. And in Northway, the people learned that not all threats wore masks or carried weapons. Some sat behind screens, rewriting reality line by line. The city of Northway had weathered fire, digital warfare, and unspeakable horrors. Each crisis left it more fractured, more paranoid, but nothing prepared its citizens, or its protectors, for the tragedy that would bring everything crashing down. It began in the quiet suburb of Rainfall District, an area untouched by the chaos that had gripped other parts of the city. It was a place where officers lived with their families, a pocket of peace amidst rising violence. That peace shattered one rainy morning when 6 police officers were found murdered in their homes, each with a single shot to the head. No forced entry, no signs of struggle. The victims were all connected. Each had been involved, directly or indirectly, in past investigations tied to the Iron Vein, Ohlren Dace, or the architect. This wasn't random. It was precise, coordinated. A message. Panic swept through the force. Officers withdrew from the field. Some resigned overnight. Internal Affairs launched a full-scale review, believing a leak had compromised high-level personnel. But the truth was even worse. It wasn't a leak. It was a betrayal from within. The prime suspect emerged after security footage surfaced showing a uniformed officer leaving one of the homes minutes before the murder occurred. The face was blurred, but the badge number was legible: 7423, assigned to Commander Halek Soren, a decorated officer with 19 years of service and an unblemished record. Halek was known as a mentor, a symbol of integrity, someone who trained younger officers and had testified in every major criminal trial in Northway over the last decade. The idea of his involvement seemed impossible, but when internal systems tried to locate him, they discovered something chilling. His last known location had been deleted. His patrol logs were erased. His access cards were deactivated before the murders occurred. A search of his home revealed more disturbing clues. Hidden behind a false panel in his garage were surveillance photographs of multiple high-ranking officers, floor plans of police stations, and coded journal entries written in a cipher that took weeks to decode. When decrypted, the journals revealed a psychological unraveling, entries full of paranoia, anger at the justice system, and cryptic references to the final reckoning. Halek believed the system had failed, not only allowing evil to persist, but protecting it. He wrote of being chosen to deliver correction. But what made the case even darker was the discovery that he hadn't been working alone. Further, investigation revealed that Halek had quietly recruited other disillusioned officers, those who had lost family to violence, who had been passed over for promotions, who had witnessed the cracks in the justice system and become bitter. He built a network, a rogue faction within law enforcement, calling themselves the Hollow Line. Their purpose was clear: purge the system of corruption by targeting anyone, criminal or officer, who had ever compromised justice in any form. Their operations had been running silently for over a year. Every unexplained disappearance, every accidental shooting, every internal suicide, it had all been orchestrated. Halek had weaponized his knowledge of the system, manipulating patrol routes, case assignments, and digital records. He wasn't hiding in shadows. He was the architect of a war no one even realized was happening. The manhunt for Halek Soren was the largest in city history. Roadblocks, air support, and national surveillance were employed. After 12 days of searching, his vehicle was found abandoned near the coastal cliffs of Darrow Reach. In the passenger seat was a folder labeled Closure, containing confessions from 12 officers who had followed him, and a final letter addressed to the people of Northway. It read simply, "You called it justice. We saw it rot. We did what the system couldn't. I hope you never forget who let this happen." Halek's body was never recovered. Some believe he jumped into the sea. Others think he vanished underground, perhaps aided by his remaining followers. To this day, whispers of the Hollow Line persist. Coded graffiti, anonymous tips, disappearances that don't make sense. The police force rebuilt, but morale never fully recovered. Every new recruit is taught the story, not as warning, but as reality. Evil doesn't always come wearing a mask. Sometimes it wears a badge. And the most heartbreaking truth the Northway police ever faced wasn't a monster in the dark. It was one of their own.